In the mid-70s, Gary Moore got scars on his face. There are different stories on how he got those scars. So let's find out what really happened to Gary Moore's face. Was it a car accident? Did it happen when Gary got into a scuffle over a girl in a pub and someone slashed his face with a broken glass? Or did that girl glass Gary herself after he had dumped her? In the late 70s, when asked how he got those scars, Gary used to answer that it was a car accident. Here is a comment I got to my old video. Claus says, I spoke to him in 1978 on a tour with Coliseum 2. He told me it happened in a car accident. Perhaps this was also agreed with the management. But in a car crash, you don't get just a couple of scars, but lots of them and some serious damage. When you go through the windscreen and medics had to pick you up from the road, it would have taken Gary several years to recover. So, obviously, the story was made up by Gary or his management. Gary's scars are identical to the scars people get when someone slashes their face with a broken glass. Besides, Phil Lynott wrote the line about Gary Moore in his song Romeo and the Lonely Girl. For all his good looks, there were scars that he took and a lesson to be learned. This line refers specifically to Gary Moore's facial scars. The name Romeo is an anagram of Moore. So, this confirms that it happened when Gary was with a girl. But what exactly happened? Eric Bell, a founding member and the original guitarist of Thin Lizzy from 1969 to 1973, says that in the late 80s, Gary Moore revealed him the story about how he got his facial scars. Gary said it happened in a bar dispute when he was protecting his girlfriend from harassment. Actually, back in the 70s, UK society was quite violent. It was normal to get into fistfights over nothing. Pub fights and glassing were pretty common in the UK. So common that they introduced plastic beer glasses in the 90s. Eric Bell actually first met Gary Moore when Gary was 11. They are both from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Gary was 3 years younger than Eric. Eric recalls that Gary was chubby and people used to call him Fat Gary, but he could really play the guitar. So, when Eric Bell couldn't take the strain, he left Thin Lizzy after throwing his guitar into the air in the middle of the concert, pushing the amplifiers into the audience and storming off stage. Later, he said that he had no regrets about leaving. I really had to leave because of ill health. It was exhaustion. And the majority of things that were available to me, I couldn't really handle it. So, Gary Moore temporarily replaced Eric Bell in Thin Lizzy. In the late 80s, when Eric lived in London, he became friendly with Gary again. They used to hang out together and talk about some really personal stuff. Eric says that sometimes Gary was a very dark person and those dreadful scars on his ruined face had a lot to do with that. Once Gary told Eric about what happened and how he got those scars on his face. Gary had a girlfriend. That was in the mid-70s. She used to go out dressed in schoolgirl outfit, a real cutie. One night they went into Dingwalls, a North London hangout. So Gary and his girlfriend were up at the bar having a drink. And there were two schmucks about 10 feet away who started mouthing about Gary's girlfriend, what they'd like to do to her. So Gary confronted them about it. He said something about, after that, one of them smashed a bottle on the bar and slashed Gary's face with it. Bell says, it must be a hard thing to come back from something like that. It changed him a lot. When Gary performed on stage, all that pain and anger would come out in his playing. One guy who used to go to Dingwalls back in those days recalls, "I'm not surprised that it happened at Dingwalls in Camden Town. I went to that club at least once a week in those days. It was a great place to see the hot London bands at the time. I remember a really nasty couple of guys who used to work there as bouncers, but they were psychos and it put me off from going there. I found out later who they were, and how they were ever employed there, I've got no idea. Sad what happened to Gary." However, some people claim this story is not true, and the girl herself glassed him in a fit of anger after he used her. Here is a comment I got from someone who watched my old video. "This is just plain bullcrap. One, he did not get the scars defending his girlfriend's honor. Two, he did not get the scars in a car crash. The truth is he got those facial scars in retaliation from a drunk girlfriend he dumped. The story about defending his girlfriend was made up to make him more hero-like. The car crash story was made up by his record company as the real truth. A vicious girlfriend was deemed unpalatable to his fans, who still believe the lies to this day. I saw Gary Moore play many times, and he really was a great guitarist. His Red House on Blues for Jimmy was never been better. But despite his beautiful playing, Gary was not a nice guy, and pretending he was does not make it so, unfortunately." Well, very interesting version indeed, but it's hard to believe that a girl could do that much damage. It looks like the work of a drunk smuck in a bar. Besides, the girl herself says that it happened in a bar. Well, her name is Donna Holton. Looks like she's all right and lives happily in England. She has photos of her with Gary. They had a relationship in the mid-70s. She later married Gary Holton, the guy who played Wayne in Auf Wiedersehen Ped, hence the surname. So, how did I find her name? Actually, when I shared my old video about Gary's scars on Facebook a year ago, Gary's then girlfriend, Dawn Holton, commented on it. She says that she was Gary's girlfriend at the time. She says that the guy in the pub wasn't harassing her, but he was flirting with her. Gary started first. He threw a glass of wine over the guy. The guy did the same, but he hit the bar. It was an accident. And she says, "Don't believe in the papers. I actually chatted a bit with her. I asked her why shouldn't we believe the story Eric Bell told in an interview. He heard it from Gary himself. Gary told him this version. Evidently, Gary didn't like that some other man was flirting with his girlfriend. And I told her that it couldn't be an accident because you can't get such scars unless someone slashes your face with a broken glass. Sounds like she defends that guy in the pub, and she liked that he was flirting with her. I said that girls who have boyfriends normally, doesn't let anyone flirt with them. And also I added that if you were there with a boyfriend, then the other guy wasn't flirting with you, he was harassing you. So looks like their relationship wasn't that serious." She just replied that she was so upset and she loved the song Gary wrote for her. So looks like Gary was very romantic about the relationship, and anyway, it wasn't a good idea to go to a pub with a girl dressed like a schoolgirl. It's an open invitation for trouble, and Gary shouldn't have been there. In 2002, Gary Moore released a hard rock album called Scars. The album title may allude to both Moore's emotional scars or the scars on his face he got in a bar scuffle.